Let's do this. The Cult of Hockey podcast by the faithful and for the faithful. I'm David Staples of the Edmonton Journal, and I'm here today with Bruce McCurdy. Hey, Bruce.
Hey, David. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good. I don't know if I have our settings right, like the video settings, and I didn't check yesterday to see how it turned out.
Same problem. We're both like wide and fairly
Oh, what do I have
small
to
in
do?
the
Show
frame.
me in the call screen. We'll just have
It
to.
works for what we see, but it's not showing up quite that way in the podcast just now. So I may have to get my in-house IT to.
What button do I hit to
tell
change
me
that
what I'm
again?
doing wrong.
Do you remember?
It's under view, but it didn't change the podcast. So.
Oh, it didn't.
Yeah. So
I see.
Let's
Okay.
carry on
Anyway.
with this
All
one.
right. These are our technical problems. Sorry about that discussion. Bruce, we didn't expect to do a podcast today, and I was not exactly happy to hear from you early in the morning with some, let's face it, bad news. I mean, in the end, you can put and I tend to roll with the punches here, and we'll see what happens. It's not the end of the world, but it wasn't good news. The St. Louis Blues have offered massive offer sheets to two young Oilers players, Philip Broberg and Dylan Holloway. The offer sheets are for 2 years per player. The compensation, if the Oilers don't match, they have 7 days to match. The compensation is a second-round pick for Broberg and a third-round pick for Holloway. Clearly, that's not the value of these players in terms of what you'd get in trade for them on reasonable contracts.
Right.
They're worth more than that.
Not close.
Yeah,
they're first-round draft choices who have subsequently made it to the NHL. I think unequivocally made the NHL in both cases. And so they're worth at least a first-round pick, right? And then you have to cash it again. Wait for it.
Yeah, they're worth at least a first-round pick and probably decent, high, like not low first-round picks either.
Oh, you just wouldn't trade top half.
You just wouldn't trade these players. So Broberg's to match, the Oilers would have to pay Broberg essentially $4.6 million over 2 years, and Holloway $2.3 million over each year for 2 years. Those are the annual cap hits: $4.6 million and $2.3 million. I'm rounding up, and which is important to note because they're both like $1 under the. If the Blues had offered $1 more, the compensation for Holloway would have been a third pick, and for Broberg would have been a first pick and just a first pick, or a first pick and a third pick?
First pick and a third was the threshold they got under for Broberg, and for Holloway they got under. It would have been a second. Like the whole range is basically double the pay, and what they can't do is make two offers in the same range because they only got one pick. Right? It has to be their own pick. So the whole secret to the double hostile offer sheet is you take two different levels where you got the draft picks to cover it. And they even traded to get that pick back yesterday.
Yeah. It's a hell of a good move for the St. Louis Blues. At worst, you cripple somewhat. You harm a division rival. At best, you get two players really cheap, two young players, just cheap. You're paying nothing to get these two players. And Bruce, it's good framing it from their perspective because it kind of puts it in the right perspective, I'm going to suggest, for the Edmonton Oilers. And my perspective is that you match on both players. I just don't think it's good value. Now the question is, do you have the cap space? But Bruce, you have a list of questions in your post on Evander Kane. There's been a lot of talk and seeming confirmation today that Evander Kane is going to have suddenly he is going to have the surgery, and he's going to be out on long-term injured reserve, and suddenly everything's clear, which is very, very interesting.
Some things are clear.
The timing of this is very interesting because suddenly the Oilers needed someone badly to go on long-term injured reserve. Yes. And it's worth noting that Holloway and Broberg could have signed any time after July 1st with the Oilers. The Oilers have had offers on the table, and they haven't done that. Why haven't they done that? Because they were waiting for offer sheets. They were waiting for something like this to happen, or maybe to improve their negotiation position. But so This is clearly something their agents have been waiting on, something the Oilers have been alive to. I think most importantly, this is something the Oilers have been alive to in a way that I think Oiler fans have been complacent about for weeks, because offer sheets are so rare. There's only, is it 9 in NHL history offer sheets in the cap era?
9 that, in the cap era.
9 in the cap era. That we did not, no one was, I was fearing this, and I think we talked about both of us fearing this, but neither of us were, I wasn't expecting it. And actually, as the more time went on, I was expecting it less and less. I was expecting them to sign. I think it was more and more likely to sign, but here we go. Here we go.
With the little used hyper weapon double offer sheet. Our friend Mike Speeds talks about these for years. He's talked about what a weapon it could be in the right circumstances. And I think my friend Supernova was on the same train. And here we are. It actually happened. Great call, guys. Too bad it happened to your team.
Yeah, you shouldn't have talked about it so much. Just kidding. I don't think anything.
Maybe Peter Chiarelli read it while he was here, and
advantage of Peter Chiarelli, Bruce. Here we go.
Peter Chiarelli.
So the Oilers are in a tough spot, but it's not hopeless. The Kane thing obviously buys them time. Anyway, you wrote a post on Kane.
Yeah.
And in the post, you presented a number of questions. We're going to take the form of this podcast. We'll be answering those questions.
Sure.
And so we'll start out. How long will Kane be eligible for long-term injury reserve? There was a report from a Vancouver family physician who often tweets on sports injuries. Surgery like this takes about 3 months to recover from. So if he were to have that surgery, let's say in the next, August, in the next couple of weeks in August,
and in November,
rush all of a sudden to have this surgery done, you're looking at, let's say conservative, and it's a little longer than that. It's on the other side of that average. We're looking at September, October, end of November. Let's say conservatively, we go to the end of November for Kane's return.
End of the year,
so we would have until December 1st, essentially, to deal with this, fundamentally deal with the problem, which is we'll take moving out. You're going to have to move some players out or a player out to make the cap space if you're going to keep these two players.
Yeah. It's and that's, I mean, the doctor, he said that this is specific to a sports hernia, which is the injury that Kane proclaimed to have.
Yeah.
Other sources suggest he has a hip problem, or maybe both. Right. And hip problems can be longer term than 12 weeks, but who knows? I mean, there's so many unanswered questions here. Like, what even is the injury? That'd be a good place to start. Yeah.
One of my first,
I guess, lower body. We'll just go there.
Just like offer sheets are part of the CBA, so is long-term injured reserve, and so is players sitting out the whole year on long-term injured reserve. That's part of the CBA. You can do that legally, and nobody can complain. Just like no one really has the, people are mad about St. Louis doing this, but this is in the CBA. They can do this. This is perfectly reasonable. It's all part of negotiation. And I actually don't have a beef with St. Louis doing it for that reason. This is legal. At the same time, if Kane really is hurt, hurt-ish, and needs surgery, and he's got a bad hip, and they need him for the playoffs, suddenly the possibility that Evander Kane sits out the whole season and comes back for the playoffs is definitely on the board. It's completely, Vegas did it. People didn't like it. People were mad. I was mad, but we'll see. This is the NHL as we see it. And Bruce, how many Stanley Cup teams have had players on long-term injured? How many Stanley Cup winning teams have had key players on long-term injured reserve all year?
All year, Kucherov. It's a prime example. He played 48 consecutive playoff games and won 2 cups without playing any regular season games or making any money against the cap in the entire time. And he was that was the bubble year that they won the first cup, right? So it was a wonky time, end of September. The next season started in January, and it went till June, July, I guess. And that was he didn't get his surgery until the season started, and lo and behold, he was out the entire season. But apparently, about 120% from game one of the playoffs, which he led the league in scoring in the playoffs. Like, this is like not some sort of secondary player.
And then we've had players sit out the last half or the last
part
third.
Of the season for the trade deadline is kind of the
Mark
crucial.
Stone twice in a row, right? And then
trade
we've also had
crucial too. If you go down before the trade deadline, you can add money.
So then, so it's the last part of the season that's far more important than the first part of the season to be on a long-term injured reserve. And although in this case, the Oilers could use the relief at any point in the season until they solve this conundrum, it's much better off with the Oilers not having to rush to solve this problem, because if they're going to have to move out players, it might be hard to move out players when everyone's settled right now, but wait till October or November and a GM's about to lose his job because he's got a gaping hole at right defense. And suddenly someone might become, Cody Ceci might become a lot more valuable to another team than he is right now. Suddenly he's got a lot of trade value that he lacks at this moment. So it's really valuable to the Oilers to have someone that they can move out on. And I'm not just, Ceci's the name that comes to mind because he's the most likely player, but it might not be him. It might be somebody else.
I heard an interesting stat about Ceci a while back, so I might not have it perfect. But he was something like the 114th paid defenseman in the league. And he was in, I think, the top 90 in points and ice time. Well, that's got to have value to some team somewhere, a solid, proven player. Like, he's
I agree.
As bad as a lot of people make him out to be.
I think Frank Saravalli reported earlier this summer that he thinks Ceci had trade value. I'm pretty sure it was Saravalli.
I don't know who posted those stats, but they were, I seem to recall 114th in payroll, and you can easily check me on Spot Track. I have it wrong, but better for points and minutes than where he ranked for pay.
His reputation at Edmonton took a beating this year, especially because his partnership with Darnell Nurse was a complete and utter flop and got worse and was terrible. Just terrible in the playoffs. But when Ceci wasn't with Nurse in the playoffs, he was good. He was just fine. Same can't be said of Nurse without Ceci, but it can be said of Ceci without Nurse. And no, I agree. I think Cody Ceci, I hope they can keep him, and maybe they will. Listen, Evander Kane's on injured reserve. It could easily be another Oiler making more than $4 or $5 million a year gets injured for some period of time this year. And there's other people. So the longer the Oilers can kick the can down the road and see what develops, probably the better off they are, rather than making. And they know this. They're not. They're very. This is these are very experienced hockey people.
Pull off the Vegas maneuver, musical alters. One guy comes off just as another guy magically goes on. Eichel came off.
Stone went on.
That was a big one.
Chicago also pulled this maneuver with Marion.
Patrick Kane. Patrick Kane in 2015. Yeah, and he legitimately, like, he broke his collarbone just before the deadline. They did go out and get a couple of helpful players with the money, and one of them got hurt, as I recall, Kim Johnson. Anyway, it was it was a legit injury, and Kane came back for the start of the playoffs against doctor's advice. Like, he wasn't physically, it wasn't like Kucherov, where he's like 125% and he's been ready for 2 months. He was like, I got to come back to help the team for the playoffs. I'm getting in there, and even if I got a bad clavicle, I can still.
And then did he lead the league in scoring in playoffs?
Kane?
Yeah,
that's a good question.
He was a pretty good playoff performer all those years. Bruce, are you sure it's Kane's hip and not his spleen that's injured?
Well, Jeff Jackson talked about his hip.
I think it's his spleen.
Spleen. Okay. Well, sports
lacerated
spleen. That could be a lot of things. Yes. Yeah, I hear you. Yeah.
Right. So so the first question is, Kane, how long do you think he what's your guess how long he'll be on it? Any contradiction to what I say, or should we move on to the next question?
Yeah, let's go. Well, I'll say end of year, but they might stretch it.
End of the
calendar year. Sorry.
Okay. All right. Next question is Broberg really worth 4.6 million per year, or should we let him walk? Go ahead.
2 years, so it's just this year, upcoming, and next year. It's not like it's 8 years at 4.6 a la Oscar Klefbom contract. It's like just you're buying his rights for 2 years down the road with a minimum qualifying offer of 4.6 for then. So he's well paid going forward as an asset. And the question is, do you think he covers the bet on the ice?
Because so what's your answer?
This year, maybe. Next year, more likely. Like, he's coming on, and he kind of hasn't got a lot of luck in terms of getting his real shot right until 10 games left in the playoffs, and then he impressed a lot of people, including apparently Doug Armstrong.
This is in some ways, this is why, like I've postulated, this could be a little bit of a blessing in disguise, and that this forces the Oilers' hand on Broberg. It's time for them to decide on this player. Make a decision. Is he in your top four? Is he ready to go or not? And I think yes, based on his play in the Stanley Cup playoffs, based on his skating ability, size, defensive ability, good stick, good passing ability. Now they know a lot more about Philip Broberg than we do, and I do believe that in December Broberg asked for a trade. Did he not? There was rumors of Broberg asked. So
December 23.
They may see him as, you know what, he's not that into us. Like here's another sign. He's just not that into us. And do we really, or they might see, actually, he's a normal human being and he wanted to play and he was ready to play in the NHL and he sucked it up, went down to the AHL, did well, came up here, was really good around the team, and then stepped into the playoffs and really fit on the team and really played well. So, and I'm guessing it's the latter. That's what they think of him. And Bruce, a young defenseman, 6'4", 215 pounds, with his skating ability and his defensive ability, his good stick on defense, who's played in the top four in the division finals and the Stanley Cup finals for that amount of money, to me, it's a no-brainer. You just keep him. And that's compounded by the fact that you have a 31-year-old defenseman who's earning $3.2 million a year, who's a good player, but he's coming to the end of being a top four D-man in the NHL as Cody Ceci. And he's still got value. And then you have Brett Kulak, who's like 28 and has 2 more years, I think, on a deal that pays him $2.75 million, who's a really good player. But again, is he a top four defenseman? He's always struggled in the top four. He did get it done in the playoffs. So I just think, personally, it's you find a way to get the cap space. I think that this sudden flurry of news around Kane, that he's going to get surgery, he's going on LTI, to me, tips the Oilers' hand. It's a tip of the hand. They are going to match at least one, if not both of these contracts, and go from there. So for me, it's just, this is really simple with Philip Broberg. And interestingly, Bruce, I did a poll. I actually misnamed one of the players, but we won't get into that in the question. But
Cody Ceci poll?
Yeah, I had Cody Ceci on the brain, but in the question, the answers to the question are actually correct. And yes. So 41% of the fans say match both the Ceci and Holloway contracts. 12% say let both go to the Blues. 22% say match only Broberg, and 25% say match only Holloway. I have never seen Oilers. They're divided. They're not divided in one way. They want to see match. They want to see a match here of some sort. But they're divided on which player to protect, which means there's going to be a ton of criticism and hard feelings if one gets protected and not the other. But I'm in the match both camp, and I'm definitely matching bro. If I had to pick one or the other, I don't know who I'll have to think about that one. But because I'm in match both. What about you? Because the next question on your list is,
if you match, it's the same question about Holloway.
So what's your answer?
If you match both, then you keep half the cap hit and you got a second round pick instead of a third. But that young Swedish defenseman, my oh my. My answer is.
Did you say you would match Broberg? You did, didn't you?
Yes, that's basically what I'm saying. Even as it hurts, like this was supposed to be the value time of his career, and that's kind of.
Well, that's one argument for not matching Bruce that we didn't get into is for both these players. So let's get into it now for a second.
Okay.
You have a cap structure where you're asking the superstar players and other players. Other players just took a major discount to sign here.
This is question number 7, by the way.
Oh, okay. Well, now let's just bump it up because it relates to whether you match Broberg or Holloway.
Yes.
And does it throw your salary structure that much out of whack? And I say if Broberg's playing in your top 4 defense, playing heavy minutes and playing well, then it doesn't. Then it's just that guy can play. He's helping us win. Nobody's nose is out of joint. And if Holloway is playing on your third line or your second line, now this is a little bit more questionable. But if he's playing up there and playing well, then nobody bats an eyelid at a second, even a third line player making $2.3 million a year in this NHL, or they shouldn't. And so do you think it sends the wrong message in terms of your salary structure?
Well, it doesn't help when you're asking other guys to maybe take a small haircut when the two guys that are lowest on the seniority poll, take a hostile offer sheet in order to maximize their position. I don't know how that goes over in the room. Like I think there's probably more potential offer sheets than we ever hear about, because when they get covered, it's just bad feelings for everyone. And they would rather resolve it in negotiations, and then you never hear of it happening, where there is a potential offer sheet and the team that has the rights resolves it before it gets any further. Well, that
they trade the player, or they sign the player.
Yeah, well, they have other options, and the Oilers can no longer trade these guys. And if they match, they can't trade them for a whole year. Like, it's not like they can sign, match and then move on from them. That's not, CBA was written very much to avoid that.
Yeah, and I didn't earlier in the day. I'm thinking, sign him and trade him, but I didn't realize I had forgotten there was that clause.
I saw that,
you can't trade him for a year. So I had to say I screwed up there, because I did. I just forgot that fact. So I think in terms of salary structure, Bruce, it's hard to know how people are going to react. You have to know that for every player signing a contract, it's one thing for a veteran player who's made 10, 15, 20, 30, 40, $60 million to take a little bit of a haircut. When you've yet to make your first 2 or 3 million, when you've made a couple million, maybe at most in the NHL so far, I mean, after taxes and stuff for both these guys, and you need to set yourself up, because you could get injured and your career could be done. I think there might be a little bit more sympathy in terms of like a union mentality, like, hey, the union negotiated this contract. This tool is there from the union to help young players get their value. These guys did that. Yes, obviously, human nature being what it is, if they don't perform, especially, many fans and possibly some players on the team will think, what the hell did we do there in matching? That said, so I think it all comes to that is a question to be answered later. It all as it is with so many players, it comes down to performance. If a guy making $9.25 million a year, not to name any names, isn't playing like that kind of player, there's probably grumbling and hard feelings on the team. But nonetheless, even though Darnell Nurse is right now seems to be a huge overpay, all these other players took haircuts to play here, Bruce. Like there's no way Nurse didn't go for all the money he could get. He did in that contract. He maximized as much as he could. And yet we hear both Draisaitl, Saravalli's reporting yesterday that both Draisaitl and McDavid are open to taking Stanley Cup discounts, as I call them, to compete for the Stanley Cup. So this is even with Darnell Nurse grabbing all the money.
Apparently Broberg and Holloway aren't.
Yeah. Aren't willing to take care of it. Yeah. But they're not. Yeah, they're not. So you have to decide. Do you still think does it meet your ultimate goal of winning the Stanley Cup to bring back the? There's only one question really.
Yeah.
Does matching help you win the Stanley Cup or not? And if it screws up, if you were convinced it was going to totally screw up your dressing room and your salary cap structure and the ethic that you're trying to instill on the team, you might let one of them go, or you might let both of them go. Yeah. So that's something that we won't necessarily know, right? About their thinking in that regard, what Oilers are thinking in that regard. If let's say they let one of them go, and that was part of it, they think, oh, he's really not that into being an Oiler. The other players would take that hard with his level of commitment to the team, him getting paid that, and they could say, okay, go. Good riddance. We're not into you. We're just not that into you. Bye.
Right. Well, on the flip side, there's this excellent observation by PoolNuge3 at PoolNuge3 on Twitter. Excellent Oilers fan observant, who says, losing Holloway, Broberg, McLeod, and Foegele in one offseason is losing a lot of youth and speed. We are already old and slow. We don't need to become even older and slower.
Completely agree. So let's talk about Holloway, Bruce.
Yeah.
Would you match?
Well, for that same reason, like they just raided Edmonton's youth core, right? Like Evan Bouchard turns 25 on October 20th, the first month of the season. These two guys walk. Evan Bouchard will be old man Bouchard will be the youngest player on the team. Like, where's the youth and where's the speed? And I mean, Fogel's a little bit older, but he was still in the lower sort of third. Was he, in his 20s? Like, there's a lot of guys on this team that are in their 30s, and there's none, barring these two guys that are in limbo, who are like even 23, 22 in Broberg's. No, they're 23.
Turns 23 in August, probably here.
Yeah. Broberg just turned, and Holloway's about to.
So with Holloway, Bruce, it's not just his speed, and especially with Evander Kane out. Holloway is a power forward. He's a legitimate, big, fast guy who hits. And how many of those guys did the Oilers have? Losing a big, fast guy who hits. Man, I don't think you want to do that. And I think, again, like for a third round pick,
that
are you
sucks,
kidding
doesn't
me?
It? Like that, yeah, that compensation is way out of line with those salaries.
Yeah, so I just think, you match Holloway. Definitely, you match Holloway. It's not that much. $2.3 million a year isn't that much, and it's for what he brings to the table. I see him in the Oilers' top 9 this year. He just kept moving up through the playoffs. He was willing to go against some big, tough, hard men in the playoffs, Bruce. Go toe-to-toe with them and hit them as hard as he could. I didn't see many Oiler forwards, including Foegele and McLeod, who were moved out because of that reason, doing
I'm not sure
that.
Foegele was.
I didn't see him hit.
Yeah.
McLeod was. Foegele wasn't a hitter, but
I see Holloway.
I heard that criticism of Foegele. I'm not saying whether that's valid or not, but I heard that criticism of Foegele.
Okay.
So
I see Holloway as sort of the obvious successor to McLeod. A center winger. He's like 2 years behind him. He's 2 years and 2 days, I think, younger than him, and the trajectories are pretty similar, except for the one thing: Holloway doesn't, he doesn't shy away from places on the ice like McLeod was, not merely accused of doing, but could be observed doing. And it was a weakness in his game. Like, I still thought he had game, but that was a weakness, and that won't be for Holloway.
I think Foegele went hard to the net. He wasn't a big hitter, but Foegele takes the puck hard to the net consistently. So
yes,
and McLeod didn't, and that was a problem. Okay, next question: Do we want to concede defeat to Doug Armstrong, Peter Chiarelli, and the Dastardly Blues? And this is a question. Yeah, but you can't. It's like thinking slow and fast. You can't think fast.
Uh-huh.
You got to think slow on this. You got okay, but because Brian Burke was, I think, the notorious guy for having a knee-jerk reaction to this and just blowing. They could have used Dustin Penner, and he was just so mad that he just washed his hands of him, I think, rather instantly, and I think that was the wrong decision then, and they challenged Kevin Lowe to a barn fight.
Yeah, he did.
And as much as it is galling that this has happened on some level, it's just part of the CBA. It's part of hockey. They had every right to do it. The players had every right to accept the contract. They're all acting in their self-interest according to the rules of the league. This is how the world works. We've had major strikes to settle these contracts, so it's done with a lot of thinking and a lot of forethought. And I was in favor of the Penner contract offer. Thought it was a really good move by the Oilers, and I think the Blues made a really good move here. I don't like it, but I don't think you factor in that at all. Does this move help you win the Stanley Cup? And that's it. That's the extent of it. And if it doesn't, you let them go. And if it does, you match.
Right. Yeah. Well, it's the instant reaction, of course, is that no, you don't let them win, and then you get even with them.
Yes, that's true.
Carolina thought they did when they took offer sheeted Jesper Kotkaniemi there. 2 years after Montreal had offer sheeted Sebastian Aho. So I think that was a revenge, and Carolina wound up with both players.
Has that worked out for them? They're paying a lot to
keeping Aho was a damn good idea.
Yeah, keeping Aho was a damn good idea, but offer sheeting Kotkaniemi in revenge.
Well,
I'm just saying, Burke's reaction was emotional, and I think the Carolina reaction was, even though it was burning for a long time, it also strikes me as being an emotional reaction.
Darcy
that just has to be really calm. What are the ramifications in terms of winning the Stanley Cup, of matching or not matching? And okay, let's move on.
2007, Darcy Regier, when Oilers offer sheeted Thomas Vanek.
Oh yeah,
$50 million offer sheet, and he matched it on the first day, and he was just raging, and just immediately, okay, whatever, we're matching it, and it saved me a week of sweating bullets, because I was praying Buffalo would match that one, because Vanek at $50 million was no longer a bargain under the salary cap. I mean, the player only covers his bet or doesn't even, and the cost was 4 first-round picks, and Taylor Hull and Ryan Nugent-Hopkins among them.
Yeah, would have set the Oilers back for a long time.
Yeah.
All right. Next question. How else can we clear up some cap, and how tough will that be with everyone knowing we're in this stress? And I think I've answered that. And the longer you wait, the better off you are. You don't move fast on this, because it's now clear Kane's on long-term injured reserve. You've got till probably early December, late November to make a decision. By then, there may be one or multiple players injured, and you might not have to move anyone. So I think this is something you wait on, unless there's a good offer for Cody Ceci right now, for instance, and you want it, and you think you have another player that you can move in there, of which I am skeptical of, unless Troy Stetcher was really playing hurt last year. Bruce, I wasn't knocked out by his play, and Josh Brown, I don't know, Phil Kemp.
Well, the price
maybe
is
this
right.
Carrick guy, maybe Ben Gleason or Sam Carrick, Connor Carrick. Yeah, Connor Carrick. You never know.
He hasn't been in the league for a while. Anyway, there's only a couple of real options to clear cap, where the team has control, because everybody's got a no movement clause that's like over $5 million, except Draisaitl. I mean, like trade Draisaitl, and I guess that would resolve everything, but I don't see that happening.
So the options are Kulak and Ceci, essentially?
Kulak and Ceci, and because Fogle isn't even around anymore. He was the other logical sort of $3 million. Everybody else is close enough to the minimum that you let the guy go and you replace him, and you're saving, a few $100,000 at most. And we're talking now Puckpedia showed the Oilers cap position as if they had matched, and it was 7.3 million minus 7.3 million. So there's, it's going to be even with Kane, when he's not on the payroll, they're still going to have to move out somebody else with salary.
Go with
or else
20
cut
players.
Way down to 21 or 20 players for
to
open the season and risk losing them on waivers, because they would have to waive a pretty good player or two to do that.
Well, they'd have to put Derek Ryan down, I think. And who else?
Well, that's the question.
Brown and
you got to get down to 20. You got to do something.
Brown and Stetcher, and one of them might be gobbled up. I maybe not. Corey Perry.
That's why Brown got the third year.
Yeah.
So he'd be the first one to send out because he's got a higher cap hit, and he's probably a little more invulnerable to being claimed.
Maybe the Blues will get him. All right. Let's move on to we've kind of covered the territory of your questions, but the last one, who will be our value contracts in 24, 25? Bruce, Zach Hyman, good value. Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, Stuart Skinner, Jeff Skinner, Victor Arvidsson, Leon Draisaitl, Adam Henrique, Connor Brown, Matthias Janmark. I will suggest they're all value contracts. Matthias Ekholm, Evan Bouchard, value contracts. Brett Kulak is right now a value contract. And even if Philip Broberg steps into the top four and crushes it, it's not a value contract because you would have hoped to get him at a lot less, but you'll get good value out of him, put it that way. Yeah. So there's a lot of value contracts on the team. It's just that we were all hoping for something that is normal to happen in the NHL, but didn't happen here because of the now the forever hated and contemptible and disgusting St. Louis Blues.
Well, that's what a lot of people think of the Edmonton Oilers, and they think they're getting what's coming to them. There's a lot of Oilers haters out there in the wider hockey world.
Yeah. So what?
Well, yeah, but they're having some laughs today, I'm sure, and because for the Oilers, it's basically lose-lose. You either lose all of your youth and speed, or you pay for at least what it's worth to you on the ice and maybe more, as opposed to getting an extra value year or two. There's there's no bridge contract there.
It really was a significant blow to the Oilers. That's the fact of the matter. That's the truth, and that's a shame. But that's hockey, right? Like that's how it works. You can get in hockey. This can happen. You can get struck low by injury, all kinds of terrible things, and you can get lucky. Wayne Gretzky can be, your owner can be on the right airplane playing backgammon with the right other owner, and Wayne Gretzky ends up in Edmonton, and. Or you're a crappy team. You're a crappy team forever. You get Connor McDavid in the lottery. All kinds of things happen, good and bad, and it's just like in a game, like with the referee. The good teams roll with it. They figure out a way. They figure out a way, and the Oilers have got to figure out a way. And I think there's a way here. And it's not that pleasant necessarily. It's much more difficult than it was before to win the cup, frankly. Their chances to win the cup, let's say it was heading into this year, it's, let's say 30%, just went down to 25 or 20% probably.
Yeah, well, there are two things that are in short supply, youth and speed, as mentioned, and cap space. And here they're just sort of direct competition with each other. You want to keep your youth and speed, well, you're going to pay through the nose for it. And even if you keep them, you're going to suffer. Like, that's the best case scenario, right? Best case scenario is that they keep them. Both guys have great years and score 10 goals each against St. Louis, right? It's a conundrum. And then you have are they pissing off the other guys that are being asked to scale back their paychecks to jump the queue like that? So it's not, there's no happy stories in here.
You know, if Broberg and Holloway had just signed 1-year deals, as was probably likely, they would have gotten paid next year anyway. Like they would have had to find significant cap space for them anyway next year. Like what would Broberg would have been? Let's say it was a top 4 D man, Bruce, and how much would he have gotten in on a new contract then anyway in arbitration?
4 million,
at least. You know, what's the NHL average going to be next year? And if you're a top 4 D man playing regular minutes, what would you get? You'd probably get it similar to this anyway. So it really, if you think about it, doesn't insulate the Oilers. Although if let's say Holloway scores 25, 30 goals this year, then it does. Then that's like, oh, we got another year of Dylan Holloway at $2.3 million. And that's good news. So, because otherwise you'd be paying $4 or $5 or $6 million for that player.
The issue is
if you had a big scoring year, which is not that likely. I'm not saying that's likely because he's not going to be on the power play. So he would have to get 25 goals at even strength, which is unlikely, but not impossible given the pedigree of the player and his skill set.
Problem is though, they're only 2 years, and even if it takes them a year to cover the bet, well, they've only got 1 more year, and you're already negotiating on how good they got in the second year. When you think of the Leon contract that we were lauding here a while back, he only got 70 points the first year of that deal, and there was just a little bit of questions, and then of course the rest is history with all the 100-point, 50-goal seasons and stuff. But if it had been a 2-year deal, the first one of those years would have been sort of middling return for the money, and so these guys got a hit right away to get out in front of these contracts.
It does put a big target on them, right? Like with the fans, there's going to be at least a third of the fans will be upset if Holloway gets matched, and at least a third of the fans will be upset if Broberg gets matched, and there'll be really loud voices on social media who are extremely upset. And then there might be players. So the heat is suddenly on these two players if they stay in Edmonton, and there's that changes things for them. Can they handle that kind of pressure? Can they ignore it? Essentially, do they have thick enough skins to just brush it off and not pay any attention to it? That's it. We'll see.
Well, it's the old story. I used to say salary equals expectations. Well, cap hit equals expectations, and the higher the cap hit, it's sort of an inverse proportion to how much patience people have with that player. And often the cap hit will be the defining thing. If they think the guy's not worth the money, they'll turn on the player. We've seen that with guys like Cody Ceci, for one example, right?
So if they have to move, let's say, in season Kulak and Ceci to keep these two guys, then
they already had.
Then you might trade at the deadline then to bring in another defenseman, and then you'd be going with one of Stetcher, Brown, Carrick, Gleason, Kemp as your 6th D man, which is an interesting prospect. But Florida, you can still. It wouldn't be surprised me not to see the Oilers sign another veteran defenseman for $1 million a year right away. If there's any good veterans out there, like Kulikov was good for Florida last year in the playoffs. So I could see the Oilers suddenly making a move like that, where they're going to bring in another veteran defenseman at $1 million a year. To
Larry Melnick won a cup here, right? Like, if you put a guy in the right role, he can,
Did he
keep him within?
He didn't play regularly though, Bruce.
He was a playoff replacement. I think Huddy got hurt, and Melnick came in and played a bunch of games and acquitted himself well.
What year was that?
85.
Didn't they lose the cup in 80? No, they won in 85, and then they lost in 85, 86. Yeah, okay. Yeah. All right, man. Any final thoughts, Bruce?
Well, it's sad that it's come to this. It's a real worry to have the two ELCs come due at the same time. And it's rare that they do, because usually they're a year out of sync with each other because the guys are at different ages.
Yeah.
And to have that be, in a situation where the team's already pretty unbalanced towards veterans, to have your two youngest guys rated at the same time is a real kick in the junk. In fact, I'd say 2 kicks, one on each side. Not a happy day for Oil fans.
No. In fact, it's one of the, in terms of like disagreement and confusion, lack of consensus, it's one of the most discombobulating and confusing days I've seen, with fans just having wildly divergent opinions on everything about this. More than like, usually people have made up their minds. This is a moment where everyone's kind of like searching for information, figuring things out, and there's just opinions are all over the place. That, Bruce, the media has yet to form the consensus. We haven't done our job yet of telling people everything they need to know and think on this. So,
well, there are different opinions. Some people really value loyalty, and if they see perceive someone as more loyal to the dollar than to the team, that doesn't land well with some people. Other people are fine with it.
That is one of the issues. And there's like 10 just like that.
Yeah.
Like there's 10 different ways of looking at this. And that's why I'm saying the opinions are all over the place. And it's kind of fascinating to see when there isn't kind of a hardened media narrative around players, which either puts you into the pro or the anti faction around players, which develops over time with almost every Oilers player. If it's just kind of up in the air, man, it's fascinating. It's the Wild West, and you hear all kinds of things. It's really interesting to me, actually, the variety of opinion that we've heard today. And there's not a consensus, other than the consensus is fans generally want them to match on somebody, one of the two. I'd say is the
70% of fans want both or one of the two.
Correct.
And then
that's a pretty broad consensus.
And almost nobody wants neither of the two.
It was only, I think it was like less than 15% in the poll. Let me just look at it.
Place, as I recall.
It was 12%, and that's about 800 votes. So it's not likely to change that much. So very few people want
7,000 votes.
No, just 800 votes so far.
Okay, 700 votes. Like that.
Yeah. Usually doesn't change once you get to about 1,000 votes. I find the percentages don't change very much.
They fixate real fast, poll numbers, I've noticed.
Yeah, it usually takes more than 500-600, but once you start getting 800, 900, 1,000, and past 1,500, you hardly ever get a change. All right, Bruce.
They're not issues where there's going to be entire groups of people that get told to write in and vote for it. So it's just not that important. It's just hockey.
Indeed. Bruce, thanks for talking today.
Yeah, thanks for listening, everyone.
And in the meantime, and in between times, this has been another edition of the Cult of Hockey podcast.